Loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Well, good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to public safety meeting. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilor Cardwell, Councilor Schultz, Councilor Joe Driscoll, um, oh, and Councilor Amir Gathers. I'm also joined by New City Clerk, Patricia, Corporation Counsel. Oh, and I see Councilor Hogan coming in, City Auditor, Nada Maroon. Thank you all, and I see Frank Kaliva as well, and many others. So thank you for joining us. Chief Cecil, you want to take it away, but first that allows Chief Cecil to present. We have about 4 items that we had initially requested for the conversation. So, Chief, we want to be able to address each item once you are done. Allow room for question before we move on to the other, and then we will go from there. So, you can take it away as you wish.
Sounds good. Thanks, Counselor. Good afternoon, everybody. We have 3, as the Counselor mentioned, we have 4 items. I'm going to take the first one, and then we have a bunch of subject matter experts that are going to take the other ones. The Chief, Kristen, Amanda, Mishka, different things like that. But I'll take the first one. The first one, pretty simple and straightforward. It's what is our internal promotion process and procedures. So I'll go over that one first. Again, very cut and dry. We are attached, first and foremost, tied to the civil service process. So everything starts with an exam, and even the civil service even gives parameters on when you can take the exam. So you can only take the sergeant's exam after 3 years on the job. You can take the lieutenant's test after 2 years as a sergeant, and you can take the captain's test only after 1 year as a lieutenant. So when you take the test, we get the scores, and we are allowed to promote within the top 3. So we can do skips, but we can't go further than the top 3 scores. We are tied to the top 3 scores. So what happens is when we have an opening, we ask the mayor if we're okay to promote. We ask the chief if we're okay to promote. If we're good on their end, we bring the 3 top scores in for an interview, face-to-face interview with the chief and the 4 deputy chiefs. And then we decide who the candidate's going to be. It's not just based on score and interview at that point. There are 9 other criterias. And I'm going to rattle these off. So if you have questions afterwards, but I'll rattle all 9 off. There's supervisor potential, job-related experience, evaluation reports, time in the grade, which means how long they've been in the grade before, whether sergeant, lieutenant, captain, or officer. Recommendations of the supervisors that supervise that person, educational records, commendations and medal awards, disciplinary records, and number 9 is just any other information that's relevant to the promotional evaluation given. I think that's it. I talk very fast, so just let me know if you have questions.
Yes, Chief. So out of the 9 criteria that you use to evaluate the potential person to be promoted, how much of a prior investment or preparation, or getting the person actually to be a potential? Because I remember that there was a conversation we had in our prior WebEx and in-person meeting about people sometimes not having interest, especially when it comes to minority, not having interest to want to take exam or even take a leadership position. How much of prior preparation, mentorship goes into the process to help a person have a courage to even want to take a shot?
Sure. So it's a great question. So I know the chief all the way down, we are constantly asking folks that we think are going to be great supervisors, great command officers to take the exam. We're constantly saying that message over and over and over again because we don't have enough qualified people that take the exam. Some people just get comfortable in the position they're at and decide to be there. And sometimes those people are the exact people that we would want in a supervisor capacity or a command officer capacity. So we are constantly delivering that message to people we think would be great at that job. And I will tell you this, beyond that, when the chief came in, one of his big focuses was getting people interested in other things, getting him trained, getting him ready to take over the ship, so to speak. So he is constantly recommending that people go to training. We make it available, whether it's high-level training or low-level training, to get them more interested in various things, not only command, but other things that will help the department to move forward.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Like it's
I can hear you.
showing me.
I
Oh,
can hear
okay.
you.
Okay. So with that, is there, I guess I'm gonna push this a little bit to Chief Buckner to kind of either brag about his record or not, to see what has that been since that was one of his focus. How has that been statistically in terms of your numbers? Have they improved, and what specifically have you done to actually improve those numbers?
Well, to your point, when we begin to drill down into the information, it was well documented that, we have about 50 or so sergeants on the police department. There are about 20 ish lieutenants. There are 6 or 7 captains that we have, and then we have 4 deputy chiefs, and then myself. Upon my arrival here, our command structure was completely white, I believe, with the exception of 1 or 2 Native American individuals in the command ranks. Today, we have 3 African American sergeants, and then we also have an African American non-sworn supervisor. The challenges that we have with that, from a race standpoint, is that getting people generally interested in taking on other responsibilities. One of the things that I commonly say at promotional ceremonies is that I became a sergeant at year 10 of my career. That was also when the job stopped being fun for me. I had a great time on the streets. I had a great time working with my fellow officers and detectives. I loved work from a fun standpoint. When I became responsible for other people, the job was no longer fun. Now, I still get some level I guess the word I'll be looking for um, of I guess return on my investment. I can't think of the word that I want to use. That the job is still satisfying to me, but it certainly is different when you become responsible for other people, and it's difficult to get people to move up, specifically along racial lines and also gender. Now we've done a really good job of promoting a number of females in the sergeant's rank. We and then for lieutenant, we had 2 lieutenants. One of the lieutenants is now, we have a female captain who was just recently promoted. So we're doing good with that. The one thing that I know about increasing diversity is that the people that you're looking for need to see and hear from the people who look like them already doing it. So if we want to be successful with women commanders need to be reaching out to other females to talk about the importance of women getting a seat at the table. Latinos need to talk to other Latinos about that because there's a journey that you take individually that myself and another African American is going to understand in a predominantly white profession. That's an uncomfortable conversation, but those are real things that go on. Now we have, in my opinion, if you raise your hand and say that you want to be promoted and we believe that you're worthy of that, we're going to develop you and get you ready to do that. But we can't give you an appetite. You have to study, you have to get yourself ready to compete in those processes so that you will get yourself to that range of where Chief Cecil talked about between the 1 and 3 that we have the latitude to reach before that we can actually promote you.
Other questions?
Can I piggyback on what he just said, what the chief just said, Councilman Joe?
Yes, Madam President. Go ahead.
Okay, Chief, and I hear what you're saying, but can some of it be the uncomfortability that folks that look like us may feel within the police department?
Oh, I'm sure. If you are a person that you come to work and you don't feel as if you fit in or that you're truly welcome or that the environment is conducive for you to ascend through the agency, that certainly can have an impact on a minority getting in the process or competing, which is why I've been very vocal about making people know that the pipelines are open for you to walk in and compete for these jobs, and we're looking for you. I'll remind everyone, if you remember my first tumultuous year that I had, one of the things that the union complained about me is that I was walking up to random women in the lobby who were in uniform and asking them, how many years do you have on the police department? Well, I have 6. Well, why haven't you taken the promotional exam? Randomly. And people complained about me doing that. So anyone that wants it, we've made the environment know that you are welcome here, provided you've done what you need to do to be worthy of this opportunity. I don't think that anyone with a straight face can say that. But to your point, President Hudson, yes, we have to create an environment where people feel like they're going to be genuinely welcome to the table.
All right.
Chief, I also have a question. Sorry, it's Councilor Guthers here. As stated before, with civil service exams and knowing that the promotional rankings are, go through the civil service exam, what are the numbers that you see? I'm going back to the point of diversifying the supervisors, right? So we have 3 out of 50 or 3 out of 47 sergeants are Black. How did they score on the test, or how is there a separate list, or is everybody mixed in to determine or to try to how do we help those who are minorities that do take the test but don't score high enough? Like I know how civil service works to a certain degree, but is there something that you guys are doing different to help reach out to those minorities? Because I know a lot of people, not even minority, but a lot of people that do want to be supervisors, some test well than others do. So is it also going off of just the test, or are we going off of morale as well, or what's the process of how you choose your supervisors?
There is one mechanism to get yourself on the list, and that is the written civil service test. No disrespect to Onondaga County civil service, but it is a horse and buggy system. It is antiquated. It does not meet the needs of this city. If I had my druthers, Syracuse would have its own civil service process, and we would be able to address some of those things. One of the things, for example, the entrance exam to become a police officer and the exam that we take for our promotional process, it's a Scantron test. Scantron takes us months to get the result. Months. Now, you can take the bar exam and you'll know right in front of that screen whether you're an attorney or not, which tells you how crazy that it takes us months to get the results. The other part, to your point, I'm a guy that I'll tell you my promotional as a minority. I was always the guy that was going to score that 85, 90-ish range on written exams. Where I began to move up on promotional lists is a portion called the assessment center. We don't have an assessment center here now. We're currently in the process with our legal office attempting to bring an assessment center into Syracuse to add to the written score to complete a composite score. It gives people who are average or poor test takers an opportunity to level the playing field because an assessment center addresses or allows you to show other skills that you may not be able to show on a written exam. Rochester has that. I believe Buffalo has that. I don't know what New York City has, but I've never worked in an agency that did not have an assessment center. And I don't like the fact of having one piece of information to determine as to where a person numerically ranks on a system. To your question about, do we have a blacklist or a minority list for the promotional and versus the general list? We do not have that. We had a similar type of list that we had during the consent decree years that we recently lost, and the city fought to try to keep that. I think it fell on deaf ears within our community. I didn't really hear a lot of pushback from the community about that, but that was one of the things that helped us get minorities through the front door, the police department. Now we no longer have that criteria that we can reach and get minorities with lower numerical scores to the list. That's been removed from us. You're going to incrementally begin to see the impact of that as minorities decrease because the mechanism that we had is no longer there. So we are believers in a composite score. We're in the process of changing that for the promotional process, but we just lost it for the entrance exam. We no longer have that because the consent decree has been removed from us.
Other questions?
Can I just jump in, Counselor? I just want to just clarify one thing. Chief, absolutely correct that we, because of that legal action, can no longer have a separate list for hiring into the department. The consent decree was modified. It hasn't entirely gone away. I just want to make sure we use the right terminology there.
Thank you. So, go ahead, Amir.
So what would be the process with modification to add that piece back in, or what are the steps you go through?
We're really in a difficult spot, Counselor. What happened was the U.S. Department of Justice, which oversees this consent decree, took the position that we had fully complied with its terms, which sounds great. And they moved to dissolve or get rid of the consent decree. And again, that's the legal vehicle that would allow us to have a separate list for Black candidates. They were successful in court, partially successful, and a federal court judge ruled that we could no longer have that separate list. So given that ruling, and his ruling was essentially that over the passage of decades, that approach is no longer consistent with federal anti-discrimination laws to basically take race as such an explicit criteria. So we can't do that any longer. We still have an obligation to take steps to increase the diversity in our ranks, but we don't have that particular tool, and I don't see any path to ever getting that tool back, unfortunately.
Councilman Gathers, we do have study sessions for the written exam, the majority of which are in Black and brown churches and learning centers and places within Black and brown communities that we do to prep our candidates for the exam to try to help them prepare for that. So we're doing what we can to try to help them with the written exam.
So moving forward, Chief, as absence of consent decrees is really going to be problematic. Is there any internal mitigation for you to be able to maybe, make up for all of this? And what rooms do you have to be able to still somewhat, keep up the numbers?
The numbers are it's going to be tough. I'll just give you a very sobering, honest response. Uh, this class that just graduated a couple of weeks ago, we started with 42. We graduated 34. I'm scheduled to start another class the last week of February. The pool that we started with in this class coming up, compared to the last class that produced 42 candidates, is 40% less. And we have a report back from some subject matter experts on making sure that our recruitment efforts are reflective of 21st century practices. We're doing most of the things that they suggested in that report. I can get you a copy of that report. We actually plan to do a presentation to you all so that you can see the report and what we're doing as an agency, kind of suggestion by suggestion. And then when you look at the climate of law enforcement, particularly in urban communities, we've lost probably 80 officers or so in the past year and a half. Resignation, retirements, people going to suburban communities, towns, and villages, some of which who retired. People are less interested in the profession because of the climate, and if they do remain in the climate, they're choosing not to be in an urban area versus a suburban town or village, is one of the patterns that we've been seeing.
And thank you for that, Chief. I guess where I'm going with this is internally, especially at the top leadership level at SPD, considering that the tools to somewhat automatically help you do your work are somewhat being removed under you. I'm wondering what are some of the leadership tools you want to be able to use to create an environment where, even if consensus decree is not there as a law, there is a culture and some kind, maybe an ethic within the department that will continue to push this forward. I guess that's what I'm trying to ask, especially at your level, and creating those environments. What are some of the measures that you're going to take, or you have already taken, to make sure that leadership is singing the same song you're singing?
Well, one of the things, and again, this gets into an uncomfortable area given some of our recent history. One of the things that we do as leadership is we try to ensure that our people are compensated fairly for the work that they do and comparable to their brothers and sisters in these county towns and villages. So one of the things that you're going to consistently see us fight for is to make sure that we stay on a level playing field with the people in our surrounding areas. Because the work that we do, we'll say it's 5 or 6, 7 times what other people are doing. We should at least be getting comparable, what we believe should maybe be more pay than what these other places are doing. So you're going to consistently see us push that to the council and to City Hall, that our people need to be compensated adequately for what they're doing and under the conditions to which they're doing it. And the other part of that is to make sure that we are adequately training them, to make sure that we are developing them as police officers, creating a climate that they're going to be supported when they do the right thing, but also the understanding that you're going to be held accountable when you do something wrong. And I think if we do both of those with the equal amount of energy, people will feel like that they're respected. The other part is to try to work on the relationship between the police and the community, which is why you see us doing as many outreach kind of things that we're doing, because everyone, just being a human being, wants to be accepted or appreciated or welcomed in the area that you're risking your life. And we have a duty to certainly to put the community in a position to where they feel that way about us, but we also want to feel a pleasant way about the people that we're serving. So that requires energy on both sides, and we recognize that we have to work on that. So there's no really one single solution to it, but there are many things that we are doing to try to create that environment that our people feel appreciated and respected for the work that they're doing. And the people who have remained here and that continue to come through our front door. We are very, very blessed that they continue to work in Syracuse because we know that they have, if you can make it through our academy, you can be a police officer anywhere in this area or anywhere in this country. And we know that, and they choose to work here for the ones that do. And we have to make sure that we're doing right by them.
And one of the things that one of the points I heard before, Chief, is that especially when that continue to impede interest in wanting to take, you know, supervisory or management role, is the fact that, you know, the pay between doing your regular job and adding a supervisory role is not much different, right? And I heard that before. Now, the first, I don't know, maybe this is somebody from administration question, that when is the SPD contract coming back, one? And while on its way coming here, is there a way you can do us a favor, Chief, by looking at other towns in other cities and give us that chart of the pay scale difference, so that we have that to see what really is the difference. Assume like Fayetteville, for example, which, you know, probably a bad example. Give us that chart and send it to all of us so that we are able to see it and be mindful of it when the time to negotiate the contract comes. Because the thing, you know, I've been here 2 years now, and I kind of sense, you know, when the contract comes, where the numbers are. So if you can do that for our new counselors, as well as refreshing our memory just a little bit with that data, that would be great.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. We're in the process of attempting to negotiate, I believe, 2021 and a 22 contract. I believe we are at the table with the city in reference to that. We will get you this pay differential as to what that looks like for cities in our area or central New York or throughout the state. And then the you know, the other part of that, you know, you talked about the differential for the ranks. We've tried to address that in the contracts, you know, with each of the passings, but it certainly is something that we try to keep our eyes on.
Okay. Other questions?
So, Councilor Majuk, I have one
Yes.
more.
Okay.
Chief Buckner, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I know you tried to do this when you first came. But Chief Cecil, Councilor Bay, myself, we all went to Buffalo, and we talked about working to try to do our own police exam. And when you first came, you kind of looked at it, so we didn't get anywhere with that.
The police exam that we currently have is given by the county.
Right.
And I don't know if it was Buffalo or Rochester. I believe Rochester was the exemption that I was aware of, that they had their own test. But the one that we currently take is a part of the Onondaga County system, which I believe that under the current umbrella that we're under, we're required to use that test.
And we talked about that. It was Buffalo, wasn't it, Chief Cecil?
Yes, it was Buffalo, where they had their own civil service department. They did everything in-house in the city of
And they
Buffalo.
had a high number of city residents, women, and minorities. That's why I was curious to know that we stopped looking at that.
Okay, can I speak to that, Counselor and
Yes.
Council President? Maybe I think Chief Buckner alluded to this a little bit earlier, but we have actually been looking at that exact issue. You know, we're constrained by this written test currently that's administered by Onondaga County. We are actively exploring two things, well, mainly one thing, which is how we can adjust that exam so it has a practical component to it, which we think will help to level the playing field. So Chief Buckner tasked the law department with working on this. We've been in touch with Rochester. We're actively looking at this right now. The question, so we would need Onondaga County's buy-in and partnership on that would be part of the process, is is advocating to the county that this is something very important to our police department and to our city, and that we need their partnership in order to develop this new exam. The question of whether, it's been raised before in these forums, why doesn't the city have its own civil service commission? Like in Rochester, they do. They're not ruled by the Monroe County Commission. They have their own. That's an extremely heavy lift that would be taking over all of civil service tasks for not just the police department, but all the departments. And that's just a resource issue for the city. But I think there's a way in really trying to partner with Onondaga County that we can at least adjust this police exam to take it out of, to use Chief's term, the horse and buggy era. So we're definitely looking at that.
Other questions?
Yeah, Chief, I was wondering do you guys have the data for the stats on the number of people that take the exam, ethnicity, gender, versus those that pass?
I believe the county has that initial front-facing piece, because once the individuals who have taken that exam, if you understand that test is for the county. So and then once they come through the Syracuse door, we begin to know what the demographics look like for the people competing to be here. But I think we can get the information. Is Mitch on here from what the county has on their front? But there was a little bit of difference of opinion as to whether or not we could ask some of those questions about demographic information that we ran into also. Mitch, could you have something on that?
Yes, sir. I'm here, and I can tell you that when the candidate eligibility report comes over to us, it does not have gender or race. Several years ago, it used to have gender and race. The county is not putting that on the eligibility list anymore. So we are not privy to that information. And so because we don't administer the exam, we wouldn't know the total count of who's taking it and who passed it. So that would be a county question. I'm not sure if they would share that with me, but I could ask.
That would be helpful. Do you know why they opted to not include that information in collecting the data?
They don't share the information anymore because we're not privy to it because of the change in the consent decree. So
I mean, I can only speculate, Counselor, but probably because we're not supposed to consider that in the hiring decision. So, I mean, that's probably why they're not sharing it. When we had the consent decree and we were permitted to look at it, that was one thing, but now we're not allowed to look at that factor in making a hiring decision.
Gotcha.
Other questions?
I have a quick question. Kristen, in researching ways to improve the exam and bring it out of the dark ages, is there any information about sign-on bonuses or signing bonuses or ways to encourage folks to apply to the academy and become police?
I'll defer to Chief on that one. That's a little bit, not really a legal question in terms of the civil service process, but
Well, ma'am, we looked at that, Councilwoman Schultz. If we're able to successfully get it, we'll call it the Derek McGork. He's the one that put that on my desk. And some of the other places around the nation are doing that, even in our state that are doing that. So we're trying to get the contract done first. Obviously, that's our big piece. But some of these other things to continue to keep us competitive. Especially because there's some early information that we're seeing some adverse impact from the residency requirement because a number of, I think we're maybe up into 15 or so candidates that advised that they would not want to pursue Syracuse because of the residency requirement. So we know we're going to have to do things to try to reverse that adverse impact. And some of these incentives that you described is one of the things that has been suggested for us and that the mayor has advised that he would consider.
Other questions? All right, let's move to item 2.
Sounds good. Counselor, just wanted to mention too, one of the items that we probably didn't go over was the cadet program that we're still working on. I know Rich Schaff is pushing that. I don't know if he's on, but he's been kind of the main person behind that. But as all of you have probably heard, the cadet program is going to involve Fowler PSLA. It's going to involve folks going there who have already said that they would like to be the police or fire, and we're going to start working that with them. We're trying to get money funds so that we can bring some of those students on board, even as high school students, to start doing some of the work at the police department, get to know the department, get to know what it's like to be a police officer, so that when the test rolls around, they can pass at a high score and come on, and they'll already be part of our family. As you can probably guess, doing so is going to give us much more diversity. They're going to come with language skills, and they're obviously going to all be city residents. So it's a very exciting program. I think at this point, we're just lacking the funds right now to bring them on board.
Thank you.
I'm Chief Cecil. Can you
Yes.
tell me what, like, lacking funds, what are you talking about? How much money? Do you know, like, what it's gonna cost to bring that on? And is that in the collaboration with the school district? Is that something that you guys are putting in the budget, or what's going on with that?
It's $6 million. No, I'm just joking. I'm just kidding. It's I don't know the actual figure, but we've been working with the Allen Foundation and a couple other groups that fund these type of things. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to, we had one grant we thought locked in for it and it fell through. So we're now working on kind of a fallback grant, but I don't know exactly where we stand with it. I don't know if the chief does. Otherwise, we can certainly get the information from Rich Schaft and get that to you.
Joker, and I can't remember the name, but I think it's the Community Foundation that stepped forward and agreed to help us finance to get it off of the ground. The program that includes the cadets and then also the person that we're going to have to hire to supervise those individuals, to making sure that they're getting the training and work experience that they need. And then the other part of that we will be doing internally with city dollars to supplement that. But the Community Foundation just recently got through their process to be the primary sponsor to get us started.
Chief, is that going to be throughout the year? Is that going to just be summer? Is that going to be after school? How are you guys planning on implementing this? And what about other opportunities in school? I know you had, other officers that were like the community liaison for the youth. Like, what are we doing when it comes to that? Like, how are we getting that message out to the other schools and the other kids so they might want to be a part of, the police department in some form of way?
Well, our primary focus for the initial cadet will be that 18 to 20-year-old kid. The feeders from the high school, we hope to come from that. In addition to that, the 100 Black Men of Syracuse is in the process of standing up a middle school version of that to be a feeder to the high schools. And then your other question about year round, this will be for the individuals in our program. This will be a year round for them, because one of the purposes is for us to keep our arms wrapped around them so that they don't do some of the kinds of things that get them knocked out during the background portion. So we can't afford to have these kids away in the summer or not under our mentoring or guidance. So once they come in, they're in until they're at that 20 and a half age to where they can begin taking the test.
So at 18, they can take the test?
No, ma'am, 20 and a half.
20 and a half.
Because they can get into the cadet program. That's when we're first targeting that age group first, these graduates of the program that Chief Fowler, Chief Cecil mentioned.
Thank you.
I have one more quick question for you, Chief, and that is, does the police department encourage or promote or market the public service loan forgiveness program? Is that something that?
I know that some folks are. I've heard conversations about that. I guess to answer your question, has it been promoted? I would say no. I know that that I've heard people talk about submitting or attempting to apply for that. I don't know if that's happened through HR or through City Hall's HR, but I know that the discussion has been had with some officers, but I don't believe that it's been promoted.
Okay, some of the quick things I'm reading online is 100% forgiveness for their college or
Sir,
training up
yeah.
to that point.
So, sir, we do fill out quite a few, HR does fill out quite a few public loan forgiveness applications. And what we notice is that it typically comes to us by class. So a couple of officers who would have been hired around the same time will come in. And as we start to process those applications, more officers will come in word of mouth that way. But we do have a display on the 5th floor that offers the application and explains the process a little bit.
Okay, but we'll put that on our list of Michigan. If you can bring it to the next small staff to talk about how we can maybe educate more folks on that, because that's a huge forgiveness of a loan is a big deal when you're talking about debt and people's quality of life. So we'll make sure that everyone has that information.
All right, Chief Cecil, let's continue.
Sure. So number 2 is 50A, data requests from the community, progress and how SPD is handling it. I believe Kristen's going to take this rather difficult one.
Thanks, Chief. Yep, these are handled through the law department, so I'll handle this one. So as many of you know, back in 2020, the state legislature repealed Civil Rights Law Section 50A, which was the section that shielded police and fire personnel records from public disclosure. So we're fully in compliance with this the repeal of that law. So we get a number of requests in through the typical FOIL process. I have some numbers for you. Since the repeal, we've received 40 requests. Some of them are, I want the records for one particular officer. Some of them are, we want every record of every officer over the past 10 years or plus. And so we've filled about 40 of the 40, sorry, there's only about 4 that we're still getting to. And those are the more recent ones. For those parties that requested years of records, what we've had to do is go back year by year. Now, keep in mind that these were paper-based records, at least starting a couple years ago, or prior to a couple years ago. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And then there's redactions that need to be performed to make sure that we're not releasing, for example, people's social security numbers or, medical information, or there's a number of things that need to be redacted. It's a hugely labor-intensive process, but we put resources into it and we've really caught up on that. We've released all records 2014 to present. So for those people who asked for, say, 10 years of records, they've already received all the records from 2014 to present. We're just working on those older years now. All told, we've released 15,000 pages of documents. So pretty significant. So I think we're doing a good job with that. And I can answer any questions.
With that, Kristen, have you seen that pretty much, have you been complying with the regular FOIL time frame and window?
Well, under FOIL, you have to acknowledge the receipt of the request within 5 days, and then you need to set a reasonable response date. There's not a hard and fast deadline in FOIL because FOIL, thank goodness, recognizes there's a wide range of requests in terms of scope. Some are, one is a single report. One might be 20 years worth of reports. So we looked at each of them and we would set an approximate fill date. Did we meet all of those? Not initially, because we were just absolutely overwhelmed. We ended up having to add another staff member, and we ended up having to get some outside help on some of the redaction work. But we put the resources in that we needed to essentially get caught up. We haven't received any. If someone felt like we were taking so long that we essentially denied their request, their remedy is to submit an appeal to the mayor. And I don't think the mayor's received any of those. So for the most part, if we were going to be delayed, we've stayed in contact with the requester and explained the situation, and people have been understanding. I've reviewed some of the news reports, of other departments approaches. There was an NPR piece on this with maybe a year ago that talked about some of the requests that went out from the media to every agency in the state and how different agencies were responding. I'd like to think that we took a very reasonable cooperative approach. We didn't send out exorbitant bills, and we didn't deny the requests. We worked with the requesters.
So on average, how many days has it taken to process this?
How many days does it take to process?
Yeah, on average.
It absolutely depends, Counselor, because like I said, there may be some requests that just want the record of one officer. That's a lot different than I want the records for every single officer over the past 10 years. Now, if someone requests the latter now, it's easier for us because we've already done the work and we just have them. But when we had to actually go through and do the redactions, it took many months. I will tell you that in general for FOIL, not just police and the repeal of 50A, we are, when we put an expected fill date on a FOIL, we average around 1 month. Some are faster, but that's generally what we promise to the requesters. If something is much, much bigger, we'll give ourselves more time. But 1 month is kind of the average.
Okay, and would any complaints go? And I'm wondering if this is Raynette question or still yours. Would any complaint in terms of the process goes back to you or to Raynette? I know you said some goes to the mayor's office, and I'm wondering if this is something that CRB receive anything.
I can't speak for the CRB, but if someone appealed to the mayor's office about our non-response, I would absolutely know about it because the mayor forwards those to me instantly. We often see those in outside of this context. If someone's requesting a police report, if it's an open investigation, we can't release an open investigation file. So we'll deny that FOIL for the investigation file. A lot of times people will appeal because they say, well, I don't understand. I want the report. And when they appeal that to the mayor will often will always check to say, can you explain what's going on with this case? So I know that all the FOIL appeals, they get run past me. And like I said, I haven't seen any. And that would be, in order to go to court, they would have to do that first.
Okay, anybody from CRV? Anything here?
Hey, good evening.
Ray?
Good afternoon, rather. So we have received requests related to FOIL and the time frame, and some requests have asked specifically for the CRB records, and we forward them over to the law department. So we have had people call and complain as it relates to it, and we send them back to the law department. They have complained about how long it's taking for them to receive the records, how they want CRB records and things of that nature. So we work alongside with the law department because we don't have enough staff to do it alone. So we have to work with the law department in order to get those requests completed.
Counselor, I should add one thing. I thought of it as I was finishing my remarks. The one issue that we are litigating is whether complaints, whether we are required to release all complaints against officers or only those that resulted in a finding that the complaint was substantiated or founded. We've taken the position that we're just releasing those that have been substantiated. We did, the NYCLU did bring suit against the city for that. We did proceed to Supreme Court and we received a favorable ruling from state Supreme Court that our position was correct. So that is the one that I was thinking about appeals. That did go through the mayor's office and I was aware of it. And then after the appeal, it did go to court. But that resolved itself. It is under appeal still, but that was the favorable decision we got.
Other questions? Okay, let's move to number 3, Chief Cecil.
Sure. Number 3 is gun violence and the mitigation measures to reduce it. I believe Chief Buckner is going to take this one.
Yep. Good afternoon. So we sent a similar piece of information over, Councilmember Joke, that in a letter that you guys may have that we sent back on August the 12th of 2021. At the time, we were explaining some of the information surrounding the right to know legislation, and you asked for additional data on that. So much of this that I'm going to give you here today, this overview, is in that letter. First is the Syracuse Police Department would describe itself as an intelligence-led police organization. We have the benefit of having the Central New York Crime Analysis Center in our building. The majority of those are state workers. We do have a person that works for the city police department that's a member of that team. One of the specific pieces of data that they certainly analyze for us that's important is that of gun crime. And we do mapping with that and also trends and patterns. One of the things that you will commonly hear us talk about in our response to some of the things that we're seeing are the POP areas. The POP areas, POP is an acronym for problem-oriented policing, and that the POP areas are generated by using 5 years of gun crime data that we are able to show concentrated areas of where those gun crimes have occurred. The city of Syracuse has 12 locations in our cities that we would define as a POP area. In the North Division, that area is Butternut, and then also the Richmond Lakeview area. For the Southeast Division, we listed the area as the East Side. For the Southwest, which is 9 of the 12 are actually in Southwest. So think about how disproportionate that is, and it's another reason why we see some of the things that go on in our city and why we have so many POP areas there. They are Midland and Ostrander, the Near West Side, Shonard and Seymour, Fitch and Dudley, Hudson and Bellevue, Furman, and then South Side and Onondaga, Midland and Colvin, and then the Pioneer Homes area. That makes up the 12 POP areas that we have in the city. Again, 9 of the 12 are in our southwest section of the city, which is normally responsible for about 50% of our homicides. From that Crime Analysis Center, we have a CompStat report that comes out each week. We have a CompStat meeting weekly. That report normally goes up for us, goes out on our city's website, that you can look at those reports as they come out weekly. And the goal of this meeting is for the command staff and other pertinent folks to discuss the operational priorities for the department. We drill down specifically looking at people and places that we believe to be responsible for the crime. One of the key missing pieces that we do not have that we will be bringing back upon this current recruit class going solo is our gun violence suppression detail. We saw their impact when they were created. We saw the impact when we had to temporarily remove them because of our staffing issues, and we're hoping to see that same impact when we bring them back. It also, for our deployment strategies as to where we're directing our officers to kind of spend their time and energy, we do it with this information. And then also, what are our measurables? You know, are we having success with reducing robberies? Or we have a group of individuals that's causing us problems? Have we come into contact with them? Have there been an arrest? Have they been picked up if they're actually wanted? All of these things are discussed during that CompStat meeting. The next component of our footprint I would describe as community policing. For the Syracuse Police Department, we define community policing as partnerships, prevention, and problem solving. A few examples of where we actually have that is through our Neighborhood Watch program that we have. I believe they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 or so Neighborhood Watch in the city. The one thing that is also very glaring is that if you look in areas that have Neighborhood Watch, historically they have lower crime than areas that do not have Neighborhood Watch programs. One of the areas of the city that has the lowest participation of Neighborhood Watch in the city is, guess where? Southwest. So it's all back to that thing to where our energy and efforts, we find ourselves concentrated in those areas, sometimes because of lack of of community engagement in those areas, and the need because of the crime and reported incidents that are going on there, and we certainly recognize that. Our PAL program that we have that was brought on last year, Jimmy Oliver has done a great job of standing that up. We serviced over 500 kids in about 6 months of him creating that program, so we expect for a full year to certainly exceed that. We also have a citizens advisory group, one for each of the 3 divisions, that helps us with things that are going on in the community for that two-way communication, to allow us to be able to get messages to them, and then them also to bring information forward to us to be able to discuss for things going on in the city. So that's kind of a brief overview of kind of what our strategy.
I think you went mute for some reason, Chief.
I thought I was the only one.
Man, I'm gonna really give it to somebody. Nobody raised a hand. Nobody.
It was only for the last 10 seconds, boss.
Yeah,
Only for the last-
you were not that long.
Oh, no, it was only the last
I
10
changed my earpiece. I thought it was me.
I hopped in right away, Chief. I'm looking out for you.
Man, they're
I was good.
plotting for my demise. This is part of my demise.
I thought you were taking a break.
I was going to tell you the last 10 minutes, Chief. So Rich was nice to you.
So what part got left out?
Literally the last 5 seconds. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Really,
Okay.
it was like the last seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we heard all about PAL and your partnerships with the community. We heard most of that.
Okay, so PAL. Okay, yeah, Citizens Advisory was the last part. We have one in each of the 3 divisions that assist us with getting messages out about crime patterns and trends going on.
Now, Chief, in regard to PAL, it's,
Yes,
you know, I know it's a great program, but one of the things I want to understand about that is I understand that it gives things opportunity, give kids opportunity to get engaged and be active, and which it has its benefit. I guess the question I'm trying to ask is there something else that PAL give besides kids just playing ball?
It's a great question, and I'm gonna have another question for this group once I answer your question. Yes, part of the thing that Jimmy, and again I want to toot this guy's horn. He was the perfect person for this opportunity, and he has knocked it out of the park. One of the things that we do is that we track kids' attendance in school. We look at their grades, and we look at behavior, because those are the things that result in kids either remaining in the classroom constructively or productively, or ending up in the back seats of our police cars. So we look at those things. And Jimmy has this formula that says that if they attend school, I believe 94% of the time, they have a caring adult that meets with them at least 1 hour a week, then those kids are more likely to graduate. So that's a part of our formula. The basketball, the soccer, the baseball, that's the carrot to get them into our circle to be able to have contact with them. Because if I say, who'd like to meet the police over at the park and we're going to talk about algebra, nobody's coming. Nobody's coming. But if we say we're going to do a soccer camp, and then while we've got you there, we say, hey, can we see your report card? That's a part of it. So it's an intelligent question, Councilman Majoke, and we recognize that while we have these kids, our jobs is to help develop them. But here's my question back to the group. When we're looking at the police to be that entity, to do those things, and police are often in this seat being asked, what are you doing? Who's responsible for this? And what are you doing about this or that? There's one thing that touches crime, that touches academics, that touches quality of life in our community. And I just had this conversation earlier today, and that's poverty. But often, who do we go to, or who do I turn to and say, well, who's responsible for poverty? We've been for a very long time listed in the top 10 in the country, but whose report card is that on? And then it's an uncomfortable question because it's you like asking someone, well, how do you wrestle an octopus or how do you move a mountain? But I think that when we look, if we're going to be in here at the table, and we should be because we have a role in poverty too, in public safety. But there are other report cards that should be reporting out to you, not just the police. And how well are these folks doing? And that's not to point fingers at anyone, but everything that we talk about that's specifically negative going on in our city, poverty touches it in a major way. And I just don't think that we have the kind of conversation constructively about it on how we're addressing it. And if we're sitting at 30% 2 years ago and we're at 29% today, why have we only moved 1%? Or what does it take to move 0.5%? I don't know the answer to that, but I know that if we can try to at least get traction with that, it's going to improve schools, it's going to improve crime, it's going to improve quality of life. But I think we first need to figure out who's responsible for it. And I think the answer is we all are, but we need to start talking about it more.
I agree with that, Chief. You know, I think all of us saw an article that Syracuse.com published, I think, was it last week or the week before, say 40% of our kids in the city school district are in poverty, you know, kids that, and then when you imagine that number and then the outcome of it, certainly it makes what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And as a community, obviously, we have a larger conversation and a larger effort that need to happen to help reach these kids and catch things that should be caught early.
Yes.
You know, so with that, I think that's the question become, okay, what do we do? Because what do we do? And then part of that answer become, you know, us bestowing some of these responsibilities to the police, some of which traditionally are not police responsibility, but community is desperate. It's desperate of people that will take charge to take care of that, in which it make it a difficult conversation that, you know, require difficult answers, you know. So I'm asking that for the PAL program, because I want to see what effort, you know, are the police putting in to make sure that the kids themselves, if there's room to help them gain more than just exercise themselves, that they actually get it.
We are measuring that, and we will have data to be able to back that up on what we're doing with the kids that are coming through our doors.
Yeah, yeah, and as just from me, you know, I think, and then we'll get back to the topic. I think that, you know, we are asking a lot of our police officers, and it's the nature of our environment. And I want to thank all of you for doing all you can, because all of us here, I always said this, I always said police officers are leaders just like all of us. And this is a leading, you know, mechanism. This is a leading effort, being in the position that all of you are. So, and we are all desperate, trying to do a lot with little, and that's where that comes from. Does anyone else has questions or a comment toward this, and then we'll get back to our mitigation conversation. So with that, Chief, you know, one of the questions I always ask, and you know, and I want us to continue to maintain it, is the community policing. One of the things you have mentioned is the neighborhood watch, and I'm wondering, you know, and one of the things you said is that neighborhood watch help reduce crimes, you know, one way or another, right? And I'm wondering, why the question become, who established neighborhood watch? Is it through police supervision? Does police initiate that, or is it a community initiated process?
It is
And
a community initiated process, but the city has significant influence with it and even funds some of it. Tony Morelli, that name may sound familiar to you. He's kind of, I guess, what I would call the Jimmy Oliver of Neighborhood Watch, even though he was long before Jimmy. Tony does an outstanding job of meeting and developing the neighborhoods, trains them on how to have their meetings and how to interact with each other. He does a really, really good job. One of the things that we've already discussed to focus on this year is to get the community more aware of what's going on with some of the things going on outside their doors in their communities and what's happening with those things in court. Because again, it's one thing to ask police on what are you doing about arresting John Doe that's committing these crimes in our neighborhoods, but then what's happening to them in the courts. And we want to educate the community to be able to track and keep up with that so that we can hold judges accountable, that we can hold criminal justice system accountable. And no one person is at fault for any of these disappointments that we have. But we think the public needs to be brought more in a transparent way as to how they can do that. And then lastly, Tony and I and all of us certainly recognize that we need to increase neighborhood watch footprint in the southwest section of the city.
yeah, and I guess, this is a conversation where we are, doing things to help ourselves. And I'm wondering if there's a way to make this much more stronger to encourage neighborhoods to have neighborhood watch. And what is that? What does that approach look like? Because it's helpful as you explain it.
Well, I will tell you that Councilwoman Schultz, the first time that I met her was with her group, and the one thing that I said to that group that she remembered actually is that I wish that other neighborhoods could see how you guys are functioning with your group, because the one thing that people who understand collective impact is they know how to move a needle. You're not going to bring liquor stores into their community. You're not going to have things next to their school. You're not going to have sidewalks that don't go a response from the city because they don't allow it. And if a community can see how a neighborhood wraps itself around those issues and then hold people like myself, public officials, accountable for our duties on those things, then that's how we do that. And that's part of what Tony does, is try to train those neighborhood groups on how to be like some of our high performing neighborhoods that have a high level of engagement, and people who, when they say they're going to send an email, the mayor's going to get 75 emails from someone because they know that when the mayor gets that, it gets his attention, and then you have every department director in the city at the next meeting. So there are communities that understand that we have to teach how to move like that, but it takes time because some of that, to Councilwoman, I believe it was President Hudson's statement earlier, some of the challenges that we have in the area where we have the least level of engagement is because that's where relationships are the most strained. That's where trust is the lowest. So we have to work on those things too while we're trying to get people to work with us. And the first part of that is recognizing and acknowledging that we have that strained relationship in an area that we're trying to get people to work with us.
Other questions?
Can I just say one thing on Chief's note on that? Thank you so much for pointing that out, because again, that was a key reason why I decided to run for this seat. Totally believe in our community. We have so many great resources, but one of my 3 things that I hope to achieve is stronger neighborhoods. And as you pointed out, Neighborhood Watch is an incredible resource. But in addition to that, we also have TNT, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And we also have neighborhood associations. And so while they all just seem like a bunch of different titles, they really do function a little bit differently. So I think it's important to try to gather those groups together and really unify them in a way where we share ideas and resources. So many of these groups operate in little bubbles, mainly because it's convenient and they feel really connected and strong with their people. But I personally would love to reach out to the Southwest side and bring some of our ideas and initiatives that we've done here. They may not fit there, but they could get some ideas from that and really try to grow their organization. So that's one of my goals in this position, is stronger neighborhoods. So we'll continue to work on that. And thank you, Chief, for your commitment to that as well.
Yeah, I thank you. Other comments, questions? Chief, 2021, and I got to look at my data here. 2021 was one of the most deadliest year in our city in terms of homicide. I guess the redundant question here is, what can we do in 2022 to make sure that 2021 doesn't repeat itself?
Well,
Besides what we just discussed already.
yes, sir. And the homicide is obviously the most unforgiving of the crime categories that we track, because we can't bring back an individual that has been murdered. To your point, it is one of our roughest years as it relates to homicides. There was a little bit of a back and forth with us and the media. The official homicide number for 2021 is 29. There were actually 32 homicides that were presented, 3 of which that were ruled justified use of force in those cases, which got us to the 29 number. That is in comparison to 31 for 2020, and I believe 31 is our record that we have. So it was a tough year for us, Councilman Majoke. We ended the year with a 2% increase of violent crime overall. And when you look at nationally, many cities are up 30-40% in violent crime. So you would think that we would be happy or celebrating that we were only up 2%. But we know enough about the numbers to know that 2021 versus 2020 comparison is one of the worst years that we've had for violent crime, period. So there's really nothing to celebrate in being 2% above one of the toughest years you've ever had. But even though that I applaud the effort of our officers that we were only up 2%. How do we work on that? I will tell you that our shooters and the victims of our shooters are getting younger, and it's very, very disturbing. Which is why programs like PAL and being productive in the classroom is very, very important. Obviously, you can see that we got off to a very tough year with our schools and some of the behavior of the kids that were going on there. The sobering part of that I always remind people of, to just take a look at the scope of what we're dealing with. If you look at some of the things that you may see that disappoints you that's going on with the school, remember those are the kids that went to school. Think about the kids that we're dealing with on the corner that didn't go to school or who refused to go to school. So we really have to do a better job with our youth. The police can't be the only one trying to solve that issue. And then obviously the other two common denominators with the drugs and then the gang element. And then, domestic violence is certainly a measurable percentage of those 3. So we continue through the violence reduction strategy that we have, continue to focus on those places and the appropriate people is our strategy for that overall, Councilman Majoke. But it's something that we certainly need the entire community engaged in assisting us. But the one big thing that we certainly are seeing that's disturbing for us is the types of crimes that our youth are committing in our city.
It's really painful, Chief, and it's painful to swallow to see we are losing young people at that rate. And as you said before, Chief, one of the things that sometimes we don't pay attention to is that we lose life to homicide. At the same time, those that committed the crime, it's some loss in some way. you know, because those people are going behind bars, you know, their contribution to society is reduced because they would have to make up the time that the crime unfortunately gave them, you know. So it's a loss in two ways, really, you know, as you always said.
Yes, sir.
Other questions?
Yes, can I ask the question of all the chiefs, actually? I know that we know that they have community guns out here. And at some point, I think you guys had went through, I might have been with the land bank to check some of the abandoned houses where they stash a lot of these guns. Are we still doing that?
President Hudson, this is Deputy Chief Trudeau. I can just speak to during the summer months and you know, early fall, we were definitely checking those areas. We even have a dog that detects you know, firearms. As it's gotten colder, I can't say that we've done that, but that is a strategy that we do deploy. Just recently, we recovered a gun from a trash can foot chase, so we're doing it.
Yeah, because that's where they're tucking a lot of them. Thank you.
On average, do we know how many guns we recover from street, Chief Trudell?
Matt
It's our
posted
crime
some-
analysis.
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
I'm sorry, the Crime Analysis Center tracks the number of guns that we have recovered to the gun, so we can get you that data.
Matt, I think Malinowski's on here. Matt, you posted that I believe it was 220 something in 2021 that we recovered.
If you just give me 1 sec, sir, I can find that out.
And a lot of things that that we do, good and bad, that we see going on in the community. I would just invite everyone to follow us on Facebook and Twitter and all of our social media platforms, because we put out a lot of really good information about the ongoing efforts of the police department.
It's 212 guns recovered for a total of 287 gun arrests.
Quite a bit. Now, and a lot of these are illegal guns, right? Not licensed gun.
Correct, sir.
Both?
Correct, sir.
Okay. Okay. And you know, I understand you may not have an answer for this. Do we know where these guns are coming from?
Oh, that's all over the city, Councilman Majoke. That's really, I mean, I guess if we were to map them, I would take my first guess to say we maybe recover more in Southwest than in other areas. Because, you know, for example, of the 29 homicides, 15 of them occurred in the Southwest. The other 14 are divided within the other two divisions. So, but I don't know if we have a mapping of that or can quantify where exactly the guns were recovered.
Just out of curiosity, do we know what the highest caliber gun that's been recovered off the streets? Because that's another thing as well. I know the community. I know some people really don't understand, you know, the different calibers, and you know, we look at things as, okay, a gun is a gun, but there's other guns that can go through objects and things like that.
I would say it would be some of the assault rifles would be the highest caliber that we reported. That's not uncommon to get those kinds of guns from some of these individuals, and it's another great point. Councilman gathers that one of the things that people will often say, because I understand the optics of it, when you see an armored vehicle rolling up to a house and we get ready to do a search warrant. And one of the stones that's commonly thrown at us is well, you're militarizing our community. And then you expect us to roll up in a paper box in front of a house where people have assault rifles and make entry into that home. It makes no sense. Now, should there be a time and place that you use an armored vehicle? Yes, you shouldn't just be willy-nilly deploying those type of vehicles, and we have very strict rules as to when we use them. But there's a time and place when we need that type of vehicle because, to your point, of the type of firearms that we're recovering on the street.
Now, and I get that some of these guns are illegal guns, Chief. Is there a way to trace to trace them in any way? And I'm asking that for this reason. Is there a way if we can trace them to maybe individuals? Is there like maybe a recurring tracing to that one individual, tracing to manufacturer, and maybe we could work with our federal representative to maybe write letters or advocate to make to talk to the manufacturer in some way.
I'll let Chief McGork or Trudell answer what happens with a weapon once we recover it. To your question, Councilman Majoke, on doing our due diligence to try to find the origin of that weapon.
Counselor, we trace all the guns that we recover, and we partner with the ATF to do everything that you just talked about. So that's an ongoing effort. You know, a lot of times we trace these guns, and the point of sale for the gun might have been, 3, 5, 7, 9 years ago, and in the meantime, the guns have changed hands. In many cases, unlawfully, to the point where there's no way for us to track who last had the gun. If that makes sense to you. The other thing that we wrestle with, I see President Hudson here mention that a lot of the guns that we recover from North Carolina, there are a vast majority or a vast number, I guess. I don't have a number for you. I could get the number for you, and I will if you'd like it. But many of the guns that we recover are from out of state. North Carolina is a big one. Georgia is another one. And we do track where these guns originate from, where they were purchased from, and many of them, if not most, are from out of state. The gun laws, the reality is the gun laws in other states are just not as strict as they are here in New York. And so we see people go down south, purchase a large quantity of guns and bring them back to New York because it's a little bit easier to do that. So without providing, I guess, too many details on a public meeting, we do work with our federal partners to trace the guns, and we do investigations on those purchases, if that makes sense to you.
Councilman Majoke, also just to remind you, last year we did, for the first time in a long time, a gun buyback with our program that we did in the summer. We had 342 guns that were turned over to us as a result of that, which was a record. And there's kind of pros and cons of audiences that say as to whether or not those kinds of programs are effective. Are gang members going to be the individuals giving their guns back? Probably not. But some of the guns that we see on the street that we get are the results of theft. So if you have a gun in your home that you don't properly secure, or that your grandfather's deceased and you no longer want it there, that gives those kinds of individuals an opportunity to discard those guns so that they don't end up in the wrong hand. And the mayor has already ordered us to do another one. We were going to do one coming up here in January, February or so, but the weather we decided would be an issue, and then also COVID. So we pushed it to probably early spring, early summer.
I have a question. If someone was to be, so say you have a gun, right? And your gun was stolen, or you sold your gun. What does the police department do? So like, I know you guys track, the guns, where they're coming from, but if the person was selling them to the community, there's people here that sell guns to kids around here all the time, right? So what happens on the other side when you find out no one reported the gun stolen, or they keep getting their guns saying somebody stole it? And like, if this is an ongoing thing, what does the police department do with that?
Chief McGork, you want to speak to that, to those kinds of examples?
Sure. And so that does happen. Ultimately, it's a matter. Certainly, if we can prove that somebody is unlawfully selling guns, there are cases that we can make and arrests can be made. And that's really the goal of those types of investigations generally. Unfortunately, Counselor, what we see often is, people who will say, my house was burglarized, or my gun was stolen and I didn't realize it. Sometimes they report guns stolen, and in some cases they might have been legitimately stolen. In some cases, we have reason to believe, and again, without getting into specific cases, we have reason to believe that probably that burglary or that theft did not occur, and that probably there is a little bit something more to it. But it really becomes a matter of whether or not we can prove that in court if an arrest is made. And so a lot of times in these investigations, we work closely with not only our federal partners, but we work very closely with the DA's office and the U.S. Attorney's office. And we need to make a decision about whether or not a case can be made. And in many cases, even if we might have, some information that leads us to believe that perhaps your gun wasn't actually stolen, that maybe, there might be something else going on. We just don't necessarily have enough to make an arrest. But without question, if we're able to prove that somebody has illegally sold a gun, that's something that we're going to prosecute, or we'll work to prosecute with the appropriate, whether it's federal or state government.
Thank you.
And those buybacks, Chief, are they once a year, twice a year? I know you said you wanted to do one this month. The weather.
Councilwoman Jokic done in partnership with the Attorney General's office, and I think they'll do them. If you think that they're going to be fruitful, that they're willing to do them with you. Obviously, funding is one of the things, because they actually are the ones that comes up with the money that pays the individuals. And but I think they'll do as many that you think that your community will support. So we certainly wanted, given that we had a record last year of the 342, we wanted to take another stab at it. So you'll be seeing another one for us, and maybe we'll do another one in the fall. We'll see how this one goes in the spring or summer.
Now, with that as well, thank you for that. With that, cause I've been out of high school for a while now. Any programs that are geared toward high school students that talk about deterring of guns and helping kids stay away from gun, or just generally any program that regularly do that to talk, either to bring people that have been in either in trouble with the law because somehow they missed their pathway and they were caught in that process and in that gun possessions, and any programs that actually bring those people back, either from correctional facilities to talk to kids, or people that are already have done their time and can educate kids in that environment. Anything like that the police does.
I'm not aware of a program specifically for that topic. Obviously, we have different interactions with the school system. Chief Trudell may be able to speak if there's something specifically from a school resource officer program, because that's where he just recently came from. So just a quick introduction to you all, because we just switched seats in our organization. So Chief McGort here, that you just saw, used to be over the investigative division, all of the felonies, the investigations, those types of crimes and the investigation of those. He's now responsible for our uniform division. So all the black and white cars, all the people in uniform work for Chief McGort, which is about 2/3 of our organization. Chief Trudell, who formerly had that job, he's now in charge of the shirt and tie guys who doing the investigations or the felonies or the follow-ups and those kind of things. So those two have swapped seats so that you have a face with who's responsible with those things. So if you're looking for something that's going on in your respective areas from a divisional standpoint, Chief McGort will be the best person to reach out to. If it's something along the lines of an investigation or homicide or some significant crime that's occurred, then Chief Trudell would be the person that you would reach out to. Rich, do you have a question or response about any programming and discussing guns or anything like that we've done in the schools?
So a particular specific program, no, other than the daily interactions that our SERP officers have in building relationships with kids. Certainly they know who the kids are that are potentially causing problems in the neighborhoods, and they work to build one-on-one relationships to encourage good behavior and talk to them about gun usage, gang, drugs, that sort of thing, but no one specific program. But I will bring up, and I think it was mentioned in the chat, that there are other things that we're doing with juveniles in our community there's a program that we partner with called Trinity, and that's specifically designed to look at kids of school age, juveniles under the age of the adult age, and to wrap services around them. And then one of the questions I think was, is that program effective? And I think it's one of those situations is, how do you prove the ones that they, that they prevented, how many shootings they prevented? I think a lot of programs maybe are like that. When you talk about street outreach or SNUG, I think if you're asking us, are we engaging with the youth and wrapping services, not police services. These are services from Salvation Army, school-based resources. The police department can, nominate a kid that we see as a problem in the community and potential for gun violence, and get that kid in this program. So I think, and that's putting your resources towards the specific people that the chief was talking about. When you talk about hot spot and hot places, or hot places and hot people, that's exactly what that program is designed. Rather than take our resources and put it, at all the kids in the school district training a certain program, we're taking our resources towards the ones that either the school district sees, the community sees, or the police sees as involved in gun violence, and trying to get resources towards them.
Other questions?
Yeah, just a quick one, Chief, if you don't mind. This is kind of off topic, but was very heartbroken reading the article in the Syracuse paper probably 2 weeks ago about the woman who was evicted and reached out. And I totally understand capacity issues, but do we think that, and I know this isn't only a Syracuse issue, but they said statewide. Is everyone familiar with the issue I'm talking about? There was a woman whose stuff was put outside of her house. And there was kind of an article about how statewide, police have not really enforced those arrests on landlords who have done that kind of behavior. And I think it's just not been in the wheelhouse statewide as a thing. Do we think that there's, and obviously, right, the conversation with so many city departments, especially SPD, is with capacity and the number of officers we have and high priorities and issues like that. But is there thought that it might be a possibility somewhere down the road to get an officer who would focus on this kind of stuff? And if we would be willing to dedicate some resources to, enforcing the tenant rights against landlords with that kind of situation?
So before I turn this over to Chief Trudell, who dealt with that intimately, us having an officer who would solely take on that responsibility, I don't see that happening. We struggle to get to your house when you've had a burglary and you still live there. So I don't have the resource to take on those kinds of things. And typical with some of this state legislative things that come out, it's a great idea when it's put into legislation. And then when we look at the operational delivery of that, you have an officer on a scene trying to determine, is the landlord right or is the tenant right, in what used to be considered a civil a situation. And now the police are being called into question. And on the example that you gave, Councilman Driscoll, we agreed that we should take a look at that to see if we did all of the things that we should have done in that matter. But none of those things are simple, and it puts our officers in a very, very difficult situation between tenant and a landlord. But we try to sift through that, and Chief Trudell can talk about that.
So the first point of contact on these types of complaints is going to be the Uniform Bureau. And I can tell you that over the course of the last month, I have put more resources into getting to the bottom of this problem than I have in gun violence or any other problem in the last month. We have built, and I got to give Sergeant Mark Russell a lot of credit, we have built a partnership not only with the district attorney's office, but also with the tenant rights associations in the city. And we hear regularly from tenants' rights. We also hear from complaints from City Hall, maybe through CRB, but certainly through City Hall and constituent services and through the DA's office. And we will individually look at every single one of those where somebody's saying that something wasn't done just right. So on an individual basis, we'll look at those. And the one that you're talking about is still under review. We're, and not to get too much into it, but we're looking at bank records. We're looking at phone texts. We're looking at all of these things to try to develop the probable cause to make an arrest. Because like the chief said, it is difficult to prove a he said, she said type situation. So that's on the individual basis. We have trained all of our officers multiple times on this, multiple training bulletins. I've spoken with our commanders. Everybody realizes that this is no longer a civil matter. There is a criminal element, if proven, to an unlawful eviction. And what the AG's office put out a document that kind of outlines what the types of probable cause are that officers can look for. It's like a help document. That was all shared with them. So there's no ambiguity as to whether or not this is potentially a crime. A report has to get written. Training broadly was done. And then individually, when complaints come up, they're at the highest level, whether a deputy chief down through to make sure we're doing the right stuff on them. And I will say, and I will give credit to the police department here in Syracuse, that of the number of arrests across the state, let's say there was like in the teens, I want to say 8 or 9 of them statewide, 8 or 9 of them were in the city of Syracuse that we made those arrests. So, I feel like we're ahead of the curve with more work to be done, but we are on top of it.
That's great to hear, Chief. I really appreciate that. And as Chief Buckner said as well, I totally get the idea of capacity and priority, when robberies are happening and where we are with capacity. But it's great to hear you're working with the Tenants Network, and I would love to see, it's good to hear that the percentage of those that were in Syracuse, and that when we see something egregious like that news story, that we do find a response. I appreciate that, and I hope it continues to work, and I'd love to hear more about it as we go along.
Happy to help. And I know you have to take those egregious media stories with a little bit of grain of salt, because we're still working through that investigation, and I'm not saying there's going to be an arrest, but what always gets presented in the media is not necessarily exactly what we can is part of the investigation. So
right, everything seems simpler in print. Yeah, I got you.
Councilor Majuk, I was wondering if I could ask a question to the chief.
Go ahead.
I certainly appreciate you being here, Chief, and all the deputy chiefs. And, I see you all, and I ask you and prevail upon you on all sorts of different issues. But, Chief, just to sort of boil it down, we've never, ever hit that limit of 420 officers the city council, and I'm talking pre-pandemic, has always budgeted for. And with these 2 new classes that you mentioned, at some point we will get close to where you feel comfortable to allocate the proper resources to mitigate some of the issues we've been talking about?
Well, the number when I arrived on our books was 468. After we went through the impact of COVID, we reduced that number down to 425. We were in that neighborhood at one point, I believe in 2019, we were close to that number. And that number was a good operational number for us. But I will also tell you, Councilman, that given all of the things that we're asked to do, once we're able to consistently be at that 425-ish number or so, I'm pretty confident that you're going to see us say that the 425 number does not work for us, given everything that we're asked to do. And the alternative to that is going to have to be this exercise that we're obviously getting ready to go through now in the police department because of the 50 or so vacancies that we have, is that what types of calls are we going to force the public to go to e-serve or teleserve? Right now, if the public says, well, I don't care that the police response time is slow, I still want to see a cop. Well, we're going to have to tighten those restrictions and make that to where these listed offenses that you either go to e-serve or teleserve, or maybe last option, you can get a civilian to come to your home, but we don't have cops to send there for you. Now, that'll be an exercise that we will do very carefully and to make sure that there are not a lot of unintended consequences as a result of that. But obviously, there'll be some blowback, but we can't continue to ask this workforce to perform at the level that we all think is acceptable with the number of personnel that we have, which is, I would say, is our number one problem right now.
Yeah, I agree, Chief. I just am trying to be as frank as anything to not only the public but my fellow counselors that obviously, we'll be entering the budget season, and this will be the first budget some of you, the city councilors, will be going through. And I think if we had a definitive number of as far as where you feel comfortable, I mean, I know you're prevailed upon all the time. I talked to Chief Cecil about the Armory Square detail and a few of the other specialties. Certainly Chief Trudell with the ATV details and all these things that are continually, and while some of the south side and the west end aren't represented by neighborhood watch groups, they're certainly represented by Syracuse United Neighborhood, the Tipperary Hill Neighborhood Association, the other groups that are affiliated, but police officers attend those meetings. I think, roughly, if we added 50 police officers, that would be another $5-6 million. And with the police contract, the last police contract that was arbitrated and passed, that'll add another $5 million to the police budget. So I just think a solid understanding of what it costs for the resources that we need to mitigate some of these issues is probably the best thing that we can somehow come to some sort of negotiation and some sort of understanding of. It'd help us out a lot. Thank you,
Sir.
Chief.
I don't disagree with anything that you said, but I will try to clarify a couple of things. Chronologically, I would first like to focus on taking care of the people that we have in this next contract that we have before us. That would be first thing. Second thing, I would like to continue our efforts to try to get us to that 425 number that you referenced, that is our funded authorized strength that we have today. With roughly 50 or so vacancies that we have, if we have 20 people in this next class, I will feel that we've done a good job of recovering, a good group of people considering the low numbers that we had. So if we're going into the summer with a class upstairs or out at OCC, but we have 30 vacancies, and then we have our normal attrition, you're right back to 50, 60 vacancies again. So it's going to take some time to get to that 425 number. But I certainly do think that we need to evaluate that, to your point, to see if 425 is not the number, then what is it? But I would caution everyone that if you gave me 100 more police officers, many of the things that we have discussed here today will not be solved with additional police officers, because the issue is not solely a police issue. Many of these issues are social issues, pillars that are broken in our community that we cannot ask police to fix. So I don't want people to think that if you raise the number to 475 and we're at 475 and you're not going to see some of the things that disappoint you each day in Syracuse. That's just not the case, because it's not solely a police issue.
Chief, I agree with you, and what Councilor Driscoll brought up to you is an example of what we expect all of a sudden police officers to be able to handle. Every ground ball that's hit to them now, as far as resolving tenant and landlord disputes. Something
Right.
40 years ago, a police officer never would have to ever tackle a problem like that.
Right.
So we understand, and I think some of those issues that you talk about are, our governments at many different levels have been trying to solve for many years. But I just know we're going into the budget season, and if we had a solid number, and as far as what it's going to cost us to have a city that's we can at least address some of these issues, it would help us out a lot. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Chief, with the new graduating class, where are we in terms of hitting the marks of 425?
Mitchka, could you give me that number? I believe is it around 375-ish?
Yes, sir. Including the current class of FTOs, we have 375 sworn members on the team. That includes the class that we just graduated.
So, Councilwoman Joke, of the 375 number that she gave you, 34 of those individuals are riding with an officer completing their training program, so they're not a solo officer.
And to give you just a little bit of perspective on that, that's 50 vacancies. Our B watch has about 54 officers. Our entire day watch patrol has 54 officers. So we're down an entire watch or more.
So with luck on our side, if we get another 2 good classes, we should be in good shape without minor retirements.
Yes, sir. And I think that, again, if we can start by keeping the people that we have to get us through this storm, which is why I chronologically put getting this next contract secured as our first in trying to address our staffing, start with retention.
All right, other questions?
If yes, Councilman Joke, if you mind, Chief, with the last statement that you made in regards to the new contract, you know, like you encourage everyone to follow the pages, you know, on all social media platforms and whatnot. I've noticed that we've had a certain number of officers, and excuse me, I had to depart myself from the meeting for a minute. So if I'm rebutting something, you know, you may let me know.
No, go ahead, sir.
That have laterally transferred to different agencies.
I think you keep coming in and out, Amir.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, there has been some officers that have laterally transferred to other agencies. What are we doing, or do you feel like the department's contract that you want to, you know, bring forth is going to help to prevent that, to also keep the numbers strong for the department?
I think that it will to a degree. We've lost a number of officers in unprecedented ways in the form of resignation. Syracuse, that my understanding was always a destination agency as it relates to officers transferring from other agencies to come to Syracuse. So that unprecedented number of resignations of officers leaving the city and going to surrounding agencies, we have not seen that in our department's history. Some of that is, I believe, the climate overall in the profession. Some of that is officers feeling some type of way about how they're treated in our city versus what the police community relationship is like in other communities. Some of that was pay that the other agencies, where you're going and doing a fraction of the work and receiving more money to work in those communities. But you know, every officer has his or her own individual reasons as to why they chose to leave. But I certainly do think that the contract is one of those things that will attempt to help us mitigate that.
Thanks, Chief.
In addition to what I had asked earlier, Chief, you know, it would be helpful for us, especially councilors. I don't know if a document or a meeting like this would do it, to kind of go over things that, you know, you think are paramount to keeping our officers. You know, a list of those things, you know, to have that discussion with us, or if you prefer to put it in a document and send it along with the salary comparison. I don't know. I want to leave that to your discretion to kind of discern it, whether which way it should go.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful. Other questions? Okay. 48, and for the interest of time, take the last one and see how much time we got. 12 minutes.
Who's our last one there, Joe?
Yep, the last one is 207C process. I believe Mishka and Amanda are going to take this one.
Yes, sir. So I see that the question is, what is the 207 process? And I was actually wondering what part of that process you were referring to.
My question. Okay, I was referring to the what do you call when the part that when you are hurt how long does it take? How long does it take to get the paperwork going? That part.
Okay. So yeah, so when an officer is injured, he needs to alert his supervisor, and within 12 hours or so, the paperwork should be initiated. The supervisor is to fill out the 207 application, which works as an injury report. That has to be approved up the chain of command, and the officer and the supervisor have 72 hours from the time of the injury to get it to human resources. So it's about a 3-day process to funnel through writing up the application. Once we receive the application in human resources, we have 60 days to make a decision on the injury. If it is an emergent situation and the officer has gone for medical care right away, we typically will get information and medical invoices very quickly because the officer went to an emergency room. All the billing comes to human resources and we are able to process it within about a 14-day period. If it is not an emergent situation, we're likely to take more of the 60 days because many times the officer is not getting any medical care and is not losing any time, but they wanted us to know that they had an injury, so they reported it.
But with that over the years, and I had initially asked for 3 years to see what would be the gradual and cumulative costs of something like that to the city.
Would you like, I can share with you a screenshot of some figures. Would you like that?
Sure.
Okay. Let me see if it will let me share the right thing. It's not going to let me do it. I can let you know from the last 3 fiscal years. So I've got information on fiscal year 18-19. We had 135 medical claims and the city paid $196,000 for those claims. Fiscal year 19 into 20, we had 95 claims and the city paid $222,226. For the next year, which was July 20 through July 21, we had 82 claims and the total paid on those claims was $152,447. So it looks like the claims have gone down and the payments that I discussed with you are medical payments, insurance payments for medical.
So what in terms of getting hurt, what seemed to be the common denominator or a common reason for all these for the especially as injuries?
So a 207 injury is going to be an injury that occurs in the performance of duty. And so I would say we have a lot of issues with lower back and lower extremities, knees, sometimes shoulders. So it runs the gamut of that rough and tumble officers either running on a chase, taking down a suspect, and of course there's some motor vehicle accidents. Those tend to be slightly more severe, but I would say most of your shoulder, knee, lower back things are when officers are using force because they have to run and catch a suspect or they're tackling a suspect.
Chief, has there been any measures taken or ways to help officers with these processes? Assume they are something that would help with their knee, the shoulders. What are some of the ways that the department has employed to try to help officers in with all these injuries?
Are you talking about through the process or to prevent the injury?
Prevention.
I don't know if we have something formally to where you're talking to people about, the kinds of injuries that we're seeing with officers. Obviously, when you're talking about lower back and lower extremities, some of that stuff is not preventable. We're a city that, look outside today, and it's slippery outside. And, we have people that fall, or we're dealing with people who are uncooperative when we're dealing with them. So there's a struggle. But to your point, maybe we can do some kind of, common things that people have been injured, and maybe to advise something, much like you see businesses that try to prevent injuries in the workplace that produce something. I've never seen that from a law enforcement standpoint because it's so broad as to how something can happen. But I think it certainly is worth looking into, Councilman Majoke, as far as guidance or something about that to the workforce. Mitch, are you aware of anything? Have we produced anything like that?
No, not specific to injuries, Chief, but what came to mind was the in-service that we do. We do in-services on defensive tactics and improving some of those tactics. And we meet with all the officers throughout the year to refresh those skills. So it's not from an injury prevention standpoint as much as it is to freshen their skills on when they're approaching a suspect that way.
Okay.
I'm asking that. Yes.
If I can just hop in real quick, I wanted to add that it's not prevention necessarily, but after an officer is injured, we have a nurse case manager on our team, Paula Tyner, who helps us monitor the officer's injuries. And if we see that they're not receiving the appropriate medical care and it's potentially exacerbating their injury, we do get involved in that instance and try to get them the appropriate medical care and make sure that, they're seeking treatment.
Yeah, and I'm asking that because I think as professional, we understand that prevention is better than cure, right? And obviously with these numbers, we are heading close to $500,000, right? In what we pay out to injuries, and I'm not disputing what was paid. I'm just trying to think of ways to help officers, not incur these many injuries. You look at 135, 95, 82. That's quite a bit. That's quite a bit. And the working, I'm more concerned of the working condition, and I understand, the nature of the line of work, but in terms of just, practice, using good practices to put the health of officers first, and then as a steward of city money, it's a lot of money going out for injuries. So that's what I would really like to see. What measures, should be put in place to kind of help officers at the same time and help save the city some money.
Okay.
I'd also just like to note too, just as a minor note, that these are the claims that went to medical care. We get probably for every claim that we place forward for care, we have 3 or 4 claims that don't require care, but they're still letting us know that they were injured. So we have many times when the officers are getting injured, minor injuries, where they learn to, shake it off and go on with the rest of their job. But they're not always major like this, the ones that we're presenting forward.
And you're right. These may be injuries where our officers just need to rest. At the same time, this is a time where a call log is going unanswered. You see, and in some ways it's costing city taxpayers money. So those are the stuff I would really like to see some kind of strategy to help our officers reduce these injuries. That I would really like to see that. City Auditor, do you have anything in that sense, or sorry to?
Thank you, Counselor.
during our workers' compensation review at the police, and like I just mentioned, the numbers, the idea of prevention is key for everybody. First and foremost, for the individual. Secondly, for the cost to the city, and third, the financial costs, and third, not having losing resource availability, meaning officers available. So I strongly support in our audit of the workers' compensation program. And I'm sure the chief and his staff really want to keep our officers safe and healthy. So I'm very grateful that you're covering it. It's key to everything that we're doing in the city.
All right. Thanks,
Can
Auditor.
I,
Other questions? Yes.
Counselor, can I just supplement this discussion? There's actually a position open right now with the city for manager of risk and workplace safety. The HR department in City Hall is actively recruiting someone to become the city's director in that area, and that person would certainly play a role in what you're talking about. I see Frank Khalil is here. He knows more about that than I do, but I want to make sure that got mentioned.
Chief, you got anything else you want to add to that?
No, sir. Just keep in mind that one little piece of some of our injuries that we have minimal control over, which is the uncooperative public.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is the answer to it. I'm just saying that giving it that maybe a suggestion or an example. Things that I would maybe want to see is maybe helping with knee injuries. For example, if officers are running and getting on the ground with the knees on the ground, are there pads that could maybe help them? You know what I mean?
Right.
Stuff like that. Measures that can be taken to reduce injuries for officers. That's what I'm saying, and that's what I'm asking if we can see something like that. Some ways, some measures that are concretely taken to help officers.
And we can present this question, because it is a good question from the prevention standpoint, to our cohort group that we've started this process to become nationally accredited. So we have access to accredited agencies. So we can pose the question to them to see what other agencies are doing in the form of prevention with workman's comp issues.
Okay.
Councilor Majok,
questions? Yes.
Just one other point that I'd like to raise. It was raised at the last committee meeting that Councilor Penagua had on workers' comp. The other component of the 207A is the, you'll see in the budget item of expense, item is well over $1 million, something in the neighborhood of $1.2 million, I believe. And that cost is born out of the fact that we have long-standing cases that need to be settled to resolve the ongoing cost to the city. And I know Frank, and I see he's back on, and the administration is in agreement with that. But it's up to the council and the administration to put those dollars in place to have for settlement purposes for these long-standing cases. It's a real drain on the budget, and there's some upfront cost, obviously, in settlement purposes, but ultimately, I think it would be in the best interest of the city and the taxpayer to try to resolve these workers' compensation cases, in this case, the 207A cases. And it's a bit skewed as it relates to the 207A because it's primarily one individual that's been longstanding and very costly, but there are others that could be solved as well, I think.
Sir, are you referring to 207C or to 207A that's a different division?
A.
Okay. So I don't think A applies to the police force, but yeah.
I mean C, excuse me. I'm
okay.
sorry.
Okay.
207C.
Thank you.
Thank you, Micah.
And Frank, as Steady Auditor talk about settlements and getting, clearing these cases out, would this be a case of ARPA? Would it fall under ARPA?
ARPA does not allow us, you can't use ARPA funds for expenses that were previously incurred prior to the passage of the act. So unfortunately not, Counselor. So it would be, as the auditor mentions, it would be a fairly significant outlay for the city, and it's one that, obviously on balance, we've decided to do other things with cash, but it is certainly something that we're actively looking at and working with our partners at PMA, both on 207 and both 207 programs and on our longstanding workers' comp. And there's a couple state programs that conceivably could help us along the way as well. They're not perfect, but they could help us with the cash up front.
Okay, Chief Buckner, I see your hands up.
A couple of small things that were reminded to me. One is that Chief Schaaf and Lieutenant Don Patty, who was one of our defensive tactics experts in the department, is working on a program where we're going to institute jiu-jitsu training for our officers. It's been used around the country in other agencies, and one of the things that it has shown is a reduction in injuries to officers and citizens, because it's about controls of that individual. So we're in the process of standing that up. And then the other is that one of the recent uniform changes that we made a modification to is that outer vest carrier to be able to take some of those things off of the waist and put them on the vest. So we that helped for some of the people who were complaining about issues around their waist.
Great idea.
Other questions, councilors? Well, Chief Buckner and all your team, I want to thank you so much for sticking with this 2-hour plus conversation. Appreciate your effort. Appreciate all you are doing for the community. Thank you so much for the information, and we will continue the conversation. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Counselor.
Counselor.